I never thought this would be my life. If you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting here, staring at my hands, wondering how everything crumbled, I would have laughed. But here I am, lost in my own home, trying to make sense of it all. Jessica and I had been married for almost 10 years. We built our lives together in Seattle, where the rain seemed to echo our quiet, steady love. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but I always believed we were solid. Trust wasn't even something I questioned, it was just there, like the foundation of a house you never think will break. Then came Ryan. He was an old friend of hers from college. They had drifted apart, as most people do, but one day, out of nowhere, his name popped up in our conversations. It was innocent at first. "Oh, Ryan messaged me today," she'd say with a smile, as if reminiscing about a time long gone. I didn't think much of it. Everyone reconnects now and then. What harm could an old friend do? But then the messages became more frequent. The laughter as she typed on her phone became more familiar, a sound that used to be meant for me alone. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find her on the couch, phone in hand, lost in conversation. When I asked, she'd shrug it off, just catching up. Catching up turned into late-night calls. Calls turned into inside jokes that I wasn't a part of. Inside jokes turned into secrets. I tried to be understanding. I didn't want to be the jealous husband who smothered his wife's friendships. But something felt off. A gut feeling, an unease that settled deep in my bones. I ignored it for as long as I could. Then, one evening, I walked into the room as she was ending a call. The way she froze, the guilt that flickered in her eyes for just a second before she forced a smile, something inside me knew. I didn't say anything that night. I sat with it, let it fester, let it grow. The next morning, I asked her outright. "Are you and Ryan just friends?" She hesitated. Just for a moment. But that hesitation was enough. She finally answered, but the way she spoke made my stomach twist. "Of course," she said, forcing a smile. "You're being paranoid." Paranoid. That word hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just her denial, it was the way she said it, like I was the problem. Like my instincts, my gut feeling, meant nothing. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to tell myself that I was overthinking everything. But doubts don't just disappear because you want them to. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more changes. She guarded her phone like it was a lifeline, never leaving it unattended. If I walked into the room, she'd casually turn it face down, as if it was just a habit. But I knew better. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. She had fallen asleep with her phone still in her hand, and I did something I never thought I'd do, I picked it up. My hands shook as I unlocked it, my heart pounding against my ribs. The messages were all there. Hundreds of them. Some were playful, filled with teasing and laughter. Others were more intimate, laced with words I hadn't heard from her in months. But the worst part? The way she spoke about me. "He doesn't get me the way you do. I feel like I can really be myself with you. I wish we had more time together." Each message was a knife, cutting deeper than I thought possible. I put the phone back where I found it, my breath shallow, my mind racing. I felt sick. Betrayed. Foolish. The next morning, I confronted her. I told her I knew, that I had seen everything. Her face paled, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, but she didn't apologize. She didn't beg for forgiveness. Instead, she got angry. "You went through my phone. That's a violation of my privacy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Out of everything, that was what she chose to focus on. Not the betrayal, not the lies, just the fact that I had caught her. I stood there, speechless, as she turned it around on me. Like I was the villain in this story. And in that moment, I knew, we weren't coming back from this. The days that followed were filled with silence. Not the comfortable kind we once shared, but a heavy, suffocating void. She avoided me, and I, despite my anger, found myself avoiding her too. We were living under the same roof, but it felt like we were miles apart. I thought she would try to make amends, to explain herself, but she didn't. Instead, she acted as though nothing had happened. She still went about her daily routine, getting ready for work, chatting with friends, scrolling through her phone, but now, there was a coldness in her presence that I couldn't ignore. I tried to talk to her, to get her to admit what had happened. "Jessica, we need to talk about this. We can't just pretend it didn't happen." She sighed, barely glancing up from her screen. "I already told you, nothing happened." "That's not true, and you know it." "I saw the messages. I read them." She finally looked at me, her eyes flashing with irritation. "You read what you wanted to read. You took things out of context." Context? That was her excuse. I felt my hands ball into fists at my sides. "Do you love him?" The question left my lips before I even realized I had spoken it. She hesitated again. And that was all the answer I needed. That night, I slept in the guest room. The physical distance between us mirrored the emotional one that had been growing for months. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if there was anything left to save. And deep down, I already knew the answer. The tension between us grew unbearable. Days turned into weeks, each moment feeling like a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. The smallest interactions became strained, and we stopped pretending. She didn't bother hiding her coldness anymore, and I stopped trying to reach her. Then one night, she finally said it. "I don't know if I can do this anymore." I looked at her, searching her face for something, remorse, guilt, anything. But all I saw was exhaustion. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Us," she whispered. "This marriage. Maybe it's already over." She left for work the next morning without saying another word. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched coffee, wondering what I was supposed to do next. Was this it? Were we really over? I had a choice to make. Fight for this marriage or walk away. I wasn't sure which one hurt more. The next few days felt like a drawn-out goodbye neither of us wanted to acknowledge. She came home later than usual, offering only a tired nod before retreating into the bedroom. I stopped waiting up for her. I stopped asking where she had been. We were ghosts, haunting the same house, speaking only when necessary. Then, one evening, she came home with a suitcase. "I'm staying at a friend's for a while," she said, her voice quiet, unreadable. I didn't ask which friend. I didn't need to. I watched as she packed a few essentials, her movements quick and efficient. She avoided my gaze, and for once, I didn't press her. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe I had already accepted what was coming. When she reached the door, she paused. "I don't know what's going to happen next," she admitted. "I just need space." I nodded, unable to find words. She hesitated for just a moment before stepping out, closing the door behind her. And just like that, she was gone. The first night without her was the hardest. I kept expecting the door to open, for her to walk back in and pretend like nothing had changed. But she didn't. The silence of the house felt heavier, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I didn't sleep much. Instead, I sat on the couch, replaying everything in my mind. What could I have done differently? Was there a moment where I could have stopped this from happening? The next morning, I woke up to a text from her. Just a simple message, "I hope you're okay." I stared at it for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. A part of me wanted to lash out, to ask her if she was okay with what she had done. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. Instead, I just replied, "Yeah." And that was it. No apology, no explanation. Just two people, once in love, now reduced to distant, polite exchanges. I don't know what comes next. Maybe she'll come back. Maybe she won't. But as I sat there, staring at the empty space beside me, I realized something. No matter what happens, things will never be the same again. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself stuck in a loop of remembering. I'd wake up and expect her to be there, only to find an empty space beside me. The house felt too big, too quiet, filled with echoes of laughter that no longer existed. Friends reached out, telling me I needed to move on. She made her choice, they'd say. You deserve better. Maybe they were right, but knowing that didn't make it any easier. I wondered if she ever thought about me, if she ever regretted what she had done. Did she miss our life together, or had she already closed the chapter and moved on? One night, I found myself staring at an old photo of us, back when things were simple, when I believed in forever. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Because love, even when it's broken, still lingers in the spaces left behind. The healing process isn't linear. Some days, I feel strong, ready to move forward. Other days, I feel like I'm drowning in memories I can't escape. But one thing is clear, I have to keep going. Life doesn't pause for heartbreak. I try to fill my time with distractions. Books, exercise, late-night walks. Anything to keep my mind from wandering to what-ifs and regrets. But the quiet moments still get me. The empty side of the bed, the unspoken words that linger in the air. One evening, I decide to go back to the coffee shop where Jessica and I used to sit and talk for hours. It's different now. The air is lighter, unburdened by the weight of our past. I sip my coffee and let the moment wash over me, realizing that I don't need answers anymore. Maybe she'll regret what happened. Maybe she won't. But I can't live my life waiting for closure that may never come. I take a deep breath and step out into the city, feeling the cool night air on my skin. For the first time in a long time, I'm not looking back. I'm moving forward. Time moved forward, whether I was ready or not. At first, the emptiness was unbearable. But slowly, something shifted. I began to reclaim my life, not as the man left behind, but as someone rebuilding. I found comfort in small things, a morning walk, the sound of my favorite records, the realization that I could cook for one and still enjoy the meal. Friends pulled me out of my solitude, reminding me that I wasn't alone. And eventually, I started to believe it. Jessica became a distant memory, a chapter one had closed. I didn't hate her, nor did I wish her harm. I simply no longer needed her presence in my life. One day, as I sat in a coffee shop, lost in thought, someone new sat across from me. She smiled, a kind, genuine smile that didn't carry the weight of the past. For the first time in a long time, I smiled back. And just like that, I knew. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't define me. A new story was waiting to be written. And this time, it was mine to create.